more. Joining me right now, Michael Landsberg, Chief Investment Officer at Landsberg, Bennett Private Wealth Management, is joining me here as we have up arrows today. We've been in a 3-day rally. We're watching for Google, $4 trillion. What are your thoughts here now on the market?
Market's been really good. I mean, part of I think the real reason the market's rallied is a lot of the experts have been underweight equities because they've underestimated the power of corporate earnings. Earnings have been really strong the last 2 quarters. And what's happened is I think a lot of Wall Street's playing catch up. And I think that's a positive for a lot of retail investors.
And I know you have some stock picks for the portfolio, but earnings season has been pretty good. The AI bubble, is that a real worry, or you're not worried about that?
I think there's a couple things to worry about. There's parts of the AI bubble you got to worry about. Is profitless tech, I think you have to worry about. But I think other areas of the market, I think you should be more concerned with either A, being underexposed to AI, B, having too much and too few names, which I think is a common theme that I see with most people. Or C, just thinking that it's only a U.S. story. There's international AI names as well. So I think you want to broaden your exposure in AI.
You know, there was a worry that there's not only an AI bubble, but also just a big bubble in general. And then I have many guests who are coming on and saying S&P 7,000, you know, you're hearing the brokers, you heard Deutsche Bank call for 8,000 next year, S&P 8,000. And JP Morgan said 7,500. If we get some cuts, it'll be 8,000 plus. So seems to be more positive than negative these days. Do you agree?
It's getting that way. I think a lot of the rhetoric is positive. What I always go back to is if I look at the futures positioning, Wall Street was short. Before the shutdown, they were short S&P 500 futures and very short Russell 2000. So I think a lot of times the talking points are it's bullish, but I think there was still some sensitivity around valuations. I think people were underweight. If we get people off the sidelines, I think you could see those big numbers.
When you talk about AI, I mean, let's look at NextEra Energy. Where does that fit into the big picture story?
Well, I like NextEra for a few different reasons. The demographic story is one that I love. Florida, biggest net gainer of people moving there. Certainly see that from New York. As we get colder up north, people want to move down there. But they're also a play on clean energy. They've got nuclear, they've got solar, they've got wind. And I like the story. It's a 10% dividend grower every single year for the last 10 years. So they're growing their dividend at compound. That's a big number. And again, the demographic story is there. They do have a little bit of AI exposure, but it's not an AI-only story like some of the other super expensive multiples in the utility space.
And you talk about Florida. I mean, we know that their Florida unit, has been having good news there. We saw something, regulator recently approving some of the agreements there in Florida in particular. So there is some local news there. Ensign Group, tell me about that.
Ensign's, we have a theme called Aging of America, which basically is we're all getting older, and we're needing more medical stuff. This is Ensign's, a smaller group in the rehab hospital, nursing home, skilled care. As we get older, we need to have places to be able to go, to be able to take care of ourselves. They've grown revenues 13% a year, compounded for the last 8 years, and it's got a beta of less than 1. And I think in this market, having some boring stocks is not a bad idea because everyone goes for the sizzle. It's nice to have some steak names in there that aren't so crazily priced.
And then Arista Networks.
Arista is one of those names, really like it's obviously an AI story, but it's been down about 20% in the last month or so because I think people were worried, Google and other names are going to start making their own switches and routers. They're not doing that. But anytime you get an opportunity to buy a really good name, I always look for the best quality names when things drop. I don't want to go trash hunting. I'd like to find some good stuff that's in a bargain bin. They're a name that's like that. We expect 25% earnings growth for the next 3 years, and it's a great name run by a great woman CEO who's excellent. She does a really good job of networking with folks, so I think it's a great name.
So we're expecting a cut in December, right, from the Fed. Do you expect more in the new year?
I think you could get more in the first couple quarters. And the reason is I think you're going to see the environment. Labor has started certainly to weaken. So I think that's an area. And inflation's not really there. I think inflation's an area that we're seeing inflation start to disinflate a bit. That's a perfect backdrop. Plus, if we get into an area where Powell is a lame duck Fed chairman, you could see the new chairman go and certainly look to do that. So I think you're going to see probably in the first half of the year, maybe a couple cuts.
And are you focusing on who will be the Fed chair? I mean, it's a lot of talk about Kevin Hassett, but there are other names, but he seems to be the front runner. Do you have a priority for that or not so much?
I typically don't. I worry about corporate earnings. Earnings to me at the end of the day is what drives stock prices. So it doesn't really matter to me who the president is, doesn't really matter who the Fed president is or chairman. I look at, as a company making money, are they growing their earnings year over year? That's what we focus on. And so any of the other stuff I think gets in a little bit of the noise space, and we try to stay away from that. Who's going to run what?
Look, we still have the possible deal between Russia and Ukraine. There's still a lot of optimism around many of the Mag 7 names. Do you have a favorite in the Mag 7 or favorites?
Yeah, I think, I look at a name like Google. I think Google's cheap here, so I think that's an area that I probably like. NVIDIA, when we look at what's going on, is it's kind of fallen off a bit recently, lost a little bit of its momentum. I think it makes sense to diversify away. Most people watching this already have too much Mag 7 to begin with.
Yeah, understood. And, are you still putting bonds in a portfolio, too? I mean, I know we've had bonds coming down now. The 10-year bond yield has sort of been all over the place. It was at 3.98, at 4.14 in just a few weeks. We've seen a variety. What do you think? Where do bonds fit in a portfolio?
I think you need bonds as a diversifier. What we've tried to do in the last 3 or 4 years is we've reduced our bond exposure and added to alts. Alts has been the gold, the dollar, that nobody really wants to own gold. This year, everybody wanted to own gold.
Gold's at 2-week highs now.
And now, but this has been this year, and it's still pretty under-owned. What we looked at is we've owned gold as a long-term holding. We'll own the U.S. dollar, some alt funds to give us some exposure because they've been able to outperform bonds. We think it's going to continue.
All right. Michael Landsberg, Chief Investment Officer, Landsberg Bennett Private Wealth Management. Thank you so much for being here. Michael Landsberg, thank you.